In this video, we're going to look at the date function. And the way you put in the date function is equals and DATE. And there's two options here. The date returns a number that represents the date in Microsoft's date time code. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And the other one is date value. And this is where you take a text string and you turn it into the number that represents the date in Microsoft's date time code. So we'll take a look at both of those and talk about the date time code. But first let's look at date. So let me hit the tab here, and the date function asks for a year, month, and day. And if I put a couple commas in here, you can see it highlight each of those things. So I'll hit escape to get out of that. Now if you just want to type in a date, then you just type in the date. And you don't need to use the date function for that. But if you had multiple options that a date could possibly be, then the date function becomes useful. Or if you've imported data from someone else and it's all represented as just a bunch of numbers, then you could use the date function to sort that or make that more presentable. So let me go ahead and bring up the worksheet that is available to download with this lecture, and you can do that and follow along. And what we have in this worksheet is the years, the month, we have the month name and the month number, and the days of the month. Okay, so let's start putting in our date function. We start with equals, DATE, hit tab, and we'll just select a year from our list. We'll choose a month number, and then we'll select a day. Do close parentheses and hit enter. Now if instead of using the number for the month, we were to click and drag it over to the month name and enter that formula, you'll see that Excel doesn't like it. And you'll see it returns a value error. If you click it and hover over that button there, it'll tell you the value entered is the wrong data type. So again, we can go back and pick another number and put that in our formula, and you'll see that it works. And if you see, if we copy this formula and paste it up a couple of cells, it'll change because we have relative cell references. So if we hit F2, you'll see it's referring to different cells now. So if we wanted to get the date formats for all of these, we could just copy this formula down the column, and it would represent all those numbers as dates. Now once you have the date displayed, you can change the format on it. You just hit Control-1 to bring up the format box. You go to date, and you have all kinds of options for how to make your date appear, depending on what you're using it for. So we can select a different one of these and hit OK, and there we've changed the formatting. One thing you want to be careful of is if you copy the formula down, paste it down here, you'll notice the year is off because our formula isn't referencing a year. But we could copy and paste this down, and then we have a year in there. And I can double click here to widen up the column so that we can see our values. Okay, so that's the date function. Let's look at the date value function. So we start with equals and date value and select it and hit tab. And let's select this particular date, close parentheses and hit enter. And you can see that our function came back with an error. It's saying that the value we've used in the formula is the wrong data type. So if we re-enter our formula to take a look at that again, notice that it says it's looking for the date text. Well, this is a number, but it wants the text. So in order to do that, let me just finish out this formula and we'll get that value error again. And let's just turn this into a text string. So I'm going to copy it, Control-C, and then we'll do paste as values. And see, now it's not a formula anymore, it's actually just the numbers of the date. If you hit the home button to go to the beginning of the text string and hit an apostrophe, that's another way to format things as a text string. And if we hit enter, now our date value function works. This number here is the Microsoft Excel date time code that we were talking about earlier. So the number 43,419 represents the date November 15th, 2018 in Microsoft's time value code. If we change the year to 2017, you'll see the number changes. It gets smaller. So to demonstrate how this works, we can take a date and just add a 1 to it. So we say equals, select this date time code, add 1, and hit enter, and it adds a number to it. And we'll copy that down a few times. You'll see it's just added 1 day to each of these numbers, because each one represents a day. And now if we go back and we select these date time values and reformat them as a date, you'll see that they're all 1 day apart. So first we choose date for the category, and we'll just pick this format and click OK. So now you can see each date is 1 day later than the next, exactly like it was with our date time formula. So let's undo that for a second. And when you have a bunch of numbers like this, these date time formulas work for the math behind the dates. And the reason that's useful is that you can use it in your Excel formulas to calculate future dates, historical dates, etc. And one just interesting side note is that if you convert January 1st, 1900 to the date value, you'll find that it's number 1. So the serial numbers that Excel keeps track of for the use of the date value starts on January 1st, 1900. And then if you look back at our example, November 15th, 2017 is number 43,054 because it's 43,054 days after January 1st, 1900. So that's just to help you understand what those numbers mean exactly. They just represent a date in time. So that's the date function and the date value function and how to use them in Excel.